we start with Hunter?
Okay, are we? Okay, you guys were gonna get started about Lori. She's running late. All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6 p.m. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. It's September 2nd, 2025, and this is our workshop meeting. Mary Ann, can I get roll call?
Mayor Young.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sartori.
Here.
Councilmember Brandon. Councilmember Painter.
Here.
Councilmember French.
Here.
Thank you. Our first agenda item tonight is discussion on the mobility plan. Jay?
Good evening, Council. Jay Houch, Community Development Director, here to introduce our consultants on our mobility plan. So as you know, we kicked this off in January earlier this year, and we're kind of getting to the point where we're wrapping things up a little bit. The good news is there's really, in our findings, there's no real major issue in Tequesta in terms of mobility, right? So you're not going to see a big solution or some big idea here. You're going to see a lot of kind of smaller ideas, ways to make people move more safely through the village. So I just want to point that out. Why is mobility important? It's for safety, connecting the community, supporting growth, helping us with funding and quality of life. And it's going to help us adapt to new technologies, which our consultants will get into. But kind of the big things are a mobility fee. So to fund mobility projects, a lot of cities are implementing a mobility fee. You can't do that without a mobility plan. Also, having a mobility plan will help us get projects put into the Palm Beach County TPA's TPA, CIP, and TIP plans. So that's kind of county funding sources. So having these projects that are kind of designed and ready to be funded will help with inclusion in that plan. And the TPA is actually, as you know, a partial funder of this study, right? We're paying $50,000, they're paying $50,000. So they've got some skin in the game. They want to see us succeed. Well, we have some good relationships there. And so we think that we've got some kind of shovel-ready projects that we'll be able to get put into that county plan pretty quickly. Also, as you're probably aware, the county is working on a countywide transportation master plan. I think it'll also get us a seat at the table for that. So if we have projects in a defined mobility plan, we'll be able to go to the county and say, hey, we have a lot of these good projects. Some of them are on county roads. Some of the projects you'll see tonight are actually mostly in the village, but kind of go a little bit into the unincorporated areas. So we hope that we can get the county to include some of these projects and also maybe opt to fund some of our projects. So that said, I'm going to introduce Alex Riesbeck and JP Wiesner. They're our consultants from Kittleson. And I'll be able to answer any questions at the end of the presentation as well. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Jay. Evening, everybody. Alex Riesbeck. I'm the project manager on this end with JP Wiesner, who's our project principal. Some of you may look familiar. He was able to stand in last time and present to y'all while I was out. So just a quick refresher here in the beginning, and thanks, Jay, for some of those notes on why this is important. So what a mobility plan is, right? It's that living document that kind of sets out to set a vision for multimodal connections across the village. It helps improve traffic, it focuses on safety, and it really helps integrate that multimodal aspect across the village. So the goal here is just really to provide that guidance and identify those opportunities across the village. So how we're going to use the plan, it's really these six things we've identified that really help set the plan aside, right? So it guides that development. Jay talked a little bit about that. Identified in this plan are those priority projects that we showed previously and kind of how we've adapted them to fit some of the feedback we heard from y'all. It supports those funding strategies, identifies different places where we can look to fund some of these projects across the village, and Jay pointed out with things like the mobility fee and through the CIP and other places. Helps shape policy across the village, builds off the comprehensive plan at the update, and helps develop some standards that we're starting to see across the region. Allows us to coordinate with partners, and I think Jay touched on that, right? Working with the TPA, they're supporting this project, but also identifying places where y'all can work with FDOT or the county to identify some of these projects. And allows us to measure that progress. So a big piece of this at the end will be, this implementation, how these get built, and what the metrics are that we're looking at to track these different projects. And then its goal is to be adopted over time. It's a living document that we hope evolves and grows, and some of the tools we identified at the end help identify some of those projects in the future in different places as we see new developments and some of these things hopefully get built. So that process, just a little touch from where we were and kind of where we are now. So we previously came in the priority project section, right in the middle. But we started off with goals and visions. We worked through the needs assessment, identified the projects, kind of shared them with y'all, got some feedback, worked through some potential policy updates, and then we are here with that draft mobility plan that we're showing y'all. So just briefly touching on again that is it existing conditions and needs assessment, right? Just some of the general findings for the village itself. That population a little over 6,000. A big piece of the existing conditions was looking at how folks are moving today and where they're going. So we see that figure on the right. We get an understanding of where the residents that live in the village are going to work, and then conversely, where the workers that work within the village, where they live. So we see a pretty big spread across the region, and we see that typical work time being 27 minutes. Some of the other pieces that we looked a little bit at include, the turning movements. We looked at volumes, historical volumes, just to get an understanding of what that traffic looks like today. And that kind of led us to this synthesis map, an understanding of what that data was, and that we kind of helped build the story that we were starting to see for mobility in the village. Helped us identify locations for potential bike ped connections, places where there needs to be a sidewalk on the other side of the street, areas of interest that we had heard through some of our initial feedback, places where folks are going today, or businesses or restaurants that they're visiting that they'd like to walk to. Potentially dangerous intersections, looking at crashes where there's clusters of crashes across the village. And this helped us identify the vision and goals. So these three main goals that were established for the mobility plan, focusing on safety first, and developing new and safe connections and building off the existing connections that y'all have. And that feeds right into the second goal, which is access, just improving mobility, general mobility across the village. Not that there's a problem today, but continuing to grow on what y'all have and continuing to build out. And then that placemaking element. There's some great places across the village, some great parks, some great open space to connect to, the beach as well. Being able to continue to grow and create new connections to those locations. A big piece of this was the public outreach. We heard a lot. I'll show on the next slide kind of how many folks we talked to across the entirety of the project, but just some of that feedback that we heard in our first public engagement event. We got out and we heard a lot about where the sidewalks are, or what types of bike lanes people want, or the types of multimodal vehicles we'd like to see. We heard a lot about how excited and proud people are to be residents within the village. Through our survey process, and in kind of tying into what that total is on the outreach, we spoke to about 300 interactions, or we totaled in about 300 interactions, with about 150 being in those online results, which the results to the right I'll touch on a little bit in a second. And then 40 online mapping comments. A big piece of this was understanding from folks if they could look at a map and tell us where there were issues today. And then about 125 interactions between our two events, between the workshop and the first pop-up event. A lot of this were things that I think y'all may agree with or certainly understand, right? So we heard a lot about cut-through traffic, a lot about speeding through different areas across the village. We heard a lot about connecting east to west, being able to walk from park to park or from your house and kind of into the center portions of the village. We heard a lot about folks using the different local roads as a side pass to kind of get through when traffic is bad on Old Dixie or US 1. And we heard a lot about where the gaps were. That was a big part of this is we heard about where the gaps were. And that kind of fed into our results, which helped set up the priority projects, which we'll touch on. So this list of projects that we had developed previously, we expounded upon the first three goals to kind of build out different categories so that all the projects that we looked at, we could bring together to start to build this prioritized process. And a big piece of this was understanding what the primary benefit was and what the secondary benefit was. Just different kind of metrics that we could look at to score, kind of develop out which one of these projects are most critical for the village and which we think will be the most successful in the short and long term. So we presented got ahead of myself. So we did that through identifying through the synthesis map, the public feedback, field reviews, and the cost feasibility. We came up with all these projects, over 50 projects across the village. From there, we kind of took our metrics and we screened back and evaluated what we could bring together, what would require different funding sources, what would require different coordination. And then we were able to begin prioritizing, kind of selecting those sets of projects down to the 10 that are going to be leading or driving the mobility vision forward. And then conceptualizing them into different project types. So we'll have cut sheets for each one of these with some different renderings to kind of share with that, and then prioritizing them and recommending them forward. So one of the big things we had previously heard from y'all is, these seem like just kind of 10 projects all over the place, how we can bring them together. And a big piece of this was thinking about them as 3 larger kind of buckets of projects, which I'm going to touch on as we continue through. But really being able to phase them out in a way that y'all can get built in the near term, but also that give you the flexibility to say, well, we want the side path here, and we want to be able to improve the intersection here. And so we've kind of laid that out so that it can be phased out and developed in a way that's successful for the village. And so we presented all 50 of these projects, kind of parsed back, and I'm not going to go through all these, I'll jump into some, but just how we kind of worked through was understanding what the project was, its location, its name, the type that we had laid out, and then its improvement itself, kind of what its benefit was to the village. And so as I said, we had about 50 of these. Originally, we had parsed back to the 10 priority projects, and that's taken this shape of these 3 larger buckets that the 10 projects fit into. So the first is this River to Ocean Trail project, essentially an east-west connection to the different parks and open spaces and green spaces across the village. We had a lot of projects pop up that were kind of shared use path or elements for a larger multimodal path for folks to walk or ride their bikes. And so as we started to look at them laid out on the map, we saw this really clear connection across. And so it allowed us to kind of break them up on the different corridors, and we'll touch on each one here in a second. That next piece being the Old Dixie Linear Park. That's the second big project. It's the one we heard the most feedback on when it came to safety, connectivity, walkability, a barrier within the village. It's how it would do something with the space, kind of wedged between the tracks and Old Dixie, and how that can be a really cool spine for the village in the future. And then the last piece is a little bit of a lump together of the safety and connectivity improvements. So there are several sections across the village where with crash data and public feedback we saw there was a huge need for just small interventions, whether it's adjustment of the curb radiuses or bringing in medians. There's just some opportunities to adjust those, and a lot of those overlap with the greater plan here. And so they lay out to kind of these 3 larger sets of projects, but 10 projects in total across the village. And so I'm going to break these down one by one, starting with the River to Ocean Trail. So as I touched on, kind of this east-west connection, kind of weaving across the village itself, in the county, up to Martin County, and down over to the Jupiter Inlet Natural Area as well. And so a part of this is understanding how we can phase this together, how we can create this connection, and then as Jay kind of touched on before, how we can collaborate with the county and with FDOT to get these projects in the long-term plans that will allow them to get built. So by creating the vision here, you can kind of lead that effort with the county and then say, this is an area that this can happen, we've got an understanding. And so that first segment is going to be Riverside Drive, which we're proposing or calling for an enhanced sidewalk or shared use path on the south and west side. There is, about a 24-foot right-of-way difference in several areas back over there, so there's plenty of space to kind of squeeze in with some permeable pavement. And then focusing on adding mobility hubs, kind of these centralized points at each of the parks or natural areas so that folks can lock their bike up and run around in the grass, or they can sit in the shade, or there's fix a flat station if you get a flat tire on your bike, or just an area for kind of just general congregation, kind of a kicking off point. One of the things we're showing for several of these River to Ocean Trail segments are a visualization of what it could look like. So in this case, we're showing a small little mid-block crossing that would connect across to the park, and then to Remembrance Park kind of through the side section there, which would just be RRFB, and then allow for that traffic across and allow us to continue east. The second segment is that Seabrook Road piece, and this is again on the western side, so tying in with the park today. We actually drove out again today and just took a look at how that could incorporate well. So right now we're just showing it as kind of a straight line to show what would be needed to get it across, but tying into that design that's out there, the park is beautiful. Tying into that and finding a way to kind of match the wayfinding efforts across, and then sticking to the western side of the road, and just connecting down. A big comment that we had heard was a connection in this segment of Riverside Drive. The mid-block crossing that's a little further to the south has been great, and a lot of the comments were about seeing more of that across the village. And so, the idea that we proposed here was having one straight just north of the entrance to the park now. Offering that opportunity for folks that live on the east side or walking from over there to just connect easily, a little more safely. The next segment is the Tequesta Drive section itself. So remaining on the west side, and you'll see a lot of other things on this map. We're going to dive into those projects as well as we continue. This segment focuses the path on the west side and then crosses over across Riverside and stays on the north side of Tequesta, and then continues in front just a couple hundred feet out from where we are today, and works its way all the way down to Willow, and then we cross back over and cross across the tracks. There's a lot happening here, a lot of high visibility crosswalks. We have some areas with some side mobility hub pullouts. The north side works really well in this segment for the most part until you get closer to the tracks, just with the right of way that's out there today in the space. It's also some really great mature trees out there that will provide shade for the path. So we've kind of worked our way of weaving around that to ensure that we can keep some of those. But really creating that central spine right through the village, making it a really multimodal corridor. And then the last segment that we focus on is the Beach Road segment. There are two other segments in the center, right? Bridge Road is where we've chosen kind of to work down and talk about, or to work across, and I'll touch on that as we are in the connectivity and safety improvement section. And then it would run down US 1 as well on the west side and cross at Beach Road at the intersection. So for this, the idea, keeping the trail on the north side and then having a mid-block connection directly to the inlet to the park, to the natural area, just allows an easier connection. We heard a lot about folks parking on the other side and walking across and vice versa, and that being an unsafe scenario. And then just continuing where we can. We do get a little constrained on the bridge with sizing. So just, formalizing the trail through wayfinding all the way out through Beach Road. So we established planning level cost estimates for each one of these across the village, and you'll see for the 10 priority projects, they're broken down in that phased approach. So with the idea being, instead of coming out here and saying, well, it's a $3 million trail that connects from this to this, and not giving a real opportunity to see how this could be phased in, we broke it down by each piece, and then also broke down essentially what's involved in each piece. So whether it's just the shared use path, or whether it's the mobility hub elements, or whether it's the traffic calming for the mid-block crossings, each of those are an individual cost so that they can be pieced together and developed in a way that would work best for y'all. So our next key bucket project is this Old Dixie Linear Park. So for everyone, north is to the left in this case, just so that we could grab a better. But Old Dixie was the most commented area that we saw in the village through our feedback. Statistically, interestingly enough, it's not as high as some other places in the village. So I think there's a little bit of some perceived safety issues. There's definitely some challenges around Tequesta Drive, especially with that turn towards Bridge Road. That's where we saw kind of the most issues, I will say. But the biggest comment that we had heard was, activating this space, really creating a green space for folks to use that connected to places that they felt were meaningful. And so a lot of our design is just improving what's out there today, formalizing that through landscaping, being able to improve the path itself to be a little bit larger, a little bit more comfortable, adding some amenities across, as I touched on, places for shade and for seating and small congregation, and kind of continue across to the northern portion of the village and then up to Martin County as well. Just creating that connection. You'll see there's that area where the propane tank is, so we have a small pinch point that will allow for that 8-foot path to continue. And so for today, it kind of just dead ends out there into that little loop, into the little circle. We are able to squeeze it just enough to make it work and feel safe and protected and to continue up. And so this would be another one of those projects as we look at it. There would be some collaboration with FDOT. There would be some opportunities to work with the county, with Martin County, to kind of establish that this is an opportunity to create this valuable connection to the village. And so moving to our last set of projects is this village safety and connectivity improvement areas. So these are really focused on corridors and intersections where we can improve safety in particular, but also where we received a lot of comments and where there's also been some plans before that we think that we can build off of. Starting with this first one, it's Bridge Road in Old Dixie. So this is an area where we see one of the highest sets of crashes, especially on that left turn movement off Old Dixie onto Bridge and vice versa. This is where we see the most interactions on the crash side. And so part of the plan here is just really formalizing that median in the center turn lane to prohibit that left turn movement. Just prohibits and increases the safety along Old Dixie. And then also off of Bridge Road, prohibiting that left turn movement as well. By formalizing that small pedestrian refuge island, it creates a safe and then comfortable connection. And then there are some future plans, hopefully for Bridge Road as it develops out with parking. And so part of that is including that shared use path and kind of setting that back far enough to kind of set it up to be built out as we see development happen in this section. The next section is that Village Boulevard in Old Dixie. This is where previously had been proposed for that roundabout. And so, we took a really long, hard look at this and started to understand what that looked like with the impacts of movement, what it looked like for the impact on volumes, with some of the resurfacing that's already happened on US 1, where some of the vehicles are going today. And the roundabout is a high-cost solution. It will work great. I'm not saying it won't. But there's some opportunity here to do a more low-cost design by removing that right turn pocket and pulling the curb radiuses up to the street. One, makes it a safer crossing and multimodal connection, but two, also brings the driver and the stop bar up closer to make that turn, so it allows for more time. And then by adding the mid-block crossing, you can also allow for RFBs to kind of just slow traffic as well across Old Dixie. So our next two will be on Dover Road, and a lot of the comments that we heard here is how this could be the front door to Constitution Park. How can we take a look at this area? Out of all the comments that we had heard, most of which were related to flooding and not being able to walk, since there are some sparse sidewalks in this area to connect to the park, so a lot of folks are walking in the street or riding their bikes in the street. So a big piece of this was how can we make this kind of feel like the front door to Constitution Park, and really that second extension where y'all are already doing some programmed events and doing things like food trucks, or just having an opportunity to formalize the parking a little bit more, especially on the south side. So we looked at making this more pedestrian-oriented street, whether it's through some sort of stamping or raising the intersection within the mid-block to the parking lot. But a big piece of this is the rain garden element that we looked at. So if we take a space and a half on that side, we're able to help kind of mitigate a little bit of the flooding that's there today. There's some pretty heavy ponding, especially as we head further west. So by adding in 3 to 4 small rain gardens kind of sparsed out, it just allows for some more free flow permeable surface to allow for some of that water to flush out. Right now it just sits and sits and sits. And we see that as we work our way west. Another comment that we had heard had been at this intersection as well, just with folks having some issues with some speeding and some bikes that are here today. So by including that small raised mid-block textured intersection, just works as a traffic calming element to help slow some of the traffic, and then incorporating the rain garden piece into that to help with some of the flooding along the road. We touched a little bit on Tequesta Drive and Seabrook, but this was the previous project that we had showed as an example. This is kind of one of the more flagships, really establishes this is kind of the key center portion of the village. It slows traffic east to west and north to south by including this kind of raised stamped concrete intersection. We move the turning radiuses out. We also make a pretty drastic change to the parking situation in the entrance that's off Seabrook in the top right. Just by kind of formalizing that and flattening, it allows for the intersection to feel a little bit more comfortable, especially for pedestrians, and allows us to kind of work with the turning radiuses a little bit better to fit in that shared use path for the crossing. In our last one will be Willow Road. So Willow Road is a really great example of things that can be done once this plan is adopted. Kind of first off, some of those really small changes that can make a really big difference. And so we'll start here at the southern portion. We heard a lot of comments about the merge point here and also where the how folks are taking this turn, especially going north and kind of cutting through on Willow. So by tightening that curb radii, bringing it out a little bit further, prohibits drivers from kind of whipping that right turn and pulling in, and also filling the sidewalk gap. Some minor changes like that go a long way. And then the bigger piece of this is some of the spot areas that we can start to do some treatments in the roadway itself. This is an area that the village controls, the right-of-way here. So there's an opportunity to be a little more creative with how we slow traffic. Heard a lot of comments about folks whipping around this right turn, or this turn to the left or the right turn to the south. So by just involving small little splitter islands, kind of taking into account for folks' driveways, but also kind of how we can help slow traffic by just putting some things out there. And the same thing was we have some speed humps that we've proposed that are an opportunity here. Kind of set the stage and really give the village its own identity, really make it its own place. And this can be done, as soon as the plan's adopted, this could be one of the first things we come out and do. A lot of these are pretty low cost, and they can be done in a way that really show the character for y'all. And so similar to the others, right, we have the cost estimates for this as well, showing, if they were all done together, we packaged them all together, they come out to $3 million. But if we work our way back, and you see Willow Road is a great example, some of these can be pieced together to allow us to do things more quickly and kind of phase out that plan in the long run. So I'll very quickly cover the program and policy recommendations, just focusing on two major pieces. A lot of these we've touched on kind of in the beginning, but a big piece of this is just on the policy and recommendations, what we can kind of give you the tools to continue this effort and to make this a living document. So part of that is just, over time, as the comprehensive plan goes to be changed in 5 years or updated, just aligning some of the goals of the mobility plan with that, or vice versa, kind of making sure that we're including that land use and roadway planning kind of long range together. Working through the zoning and land development updates, just requiring new developments to have things like bike parking or added connectivity to help with multimodal elements. Focusing on just parking minimal adjustments, just reevaluate some of that to allow for credits for golf carts, which I'm actually, and low speed vehicles, which I'm going to touch on in the next couple slides. The Palm Beach TPA, recently published their 2050 or 2025 Vision Zero Action Plan, just continuing to adopt some of those policies to eliminate severe crashes and improve conditions for all users on the road. And then continuing to place-make and develop great streetscapes. There are some beautiful roadways out in the village, some beautiful, very tree canopy lined. So just continuing to build and encourage that type of development across the village. The two pieces I want to focus the most on are the low-speed vehicle initiatives and then the e-bike safety. So a really big piece of this is just building off of the 2019 case study that was done around golf carts in particular, and just making sure that low-speed vehicles, if used, just understanding the difference and bringing in policies that are similar. So a big part of this is just understanding what it's like for the roadway, right? So for low-speed vehicles, we are allowed to do that 25 mile an hour max, but they are allowed on 35 mile an hour roads. So we see things like Tequesta and Riverside and Seabrook and County Line being included in some of those areas that are identified. Offering the parking incentives, that was another big piece as we look at this on just how we can continue to adapt. And then doing pilot projects, a big piece is what areas can we look at around some of the parks or some of the main businesses that we can bring in low-speed vehicle parking. Just kind of include some of that to start understanding how they will work with traffic and with multimodal users today. And then just continuing to support that sustainability and be flexible. And we have a whole big section kind of highlighting different areas across the village where some of this will work. Just being able to kind of continue to free that space up for some of the great parks that you all have today. And then our last two on the program piece is the e-bike safety. So a really big piece across the state of Florida has been e-bike safety. There have been a lot of stories about the challenges with e-bikes across, especially South Florida. And so just continuing to focus all initiatives and enforcement towards, highlighting some of the challenges, but also making sure that folks that are riding are doing it safely today. So that includes installing clear signage, making sure that shared use paths are either striped or shown in different zones so that folks know what side is correct to ride on, so that we don't have anybody running anybody over. That can be done with striping the center line or including signage that just says where a rider should be. The big piece, so we took a look at a lot of the municipalities and some of the other towns throughout the county, just started to get an understanding of how they have been dealing with e-bikes and how they've been successful. And a couple of the big main pieces that we heard about is just continuing to get it out there in the public through things like flyers and banners on helmets, just being able to continue to say speed awareness and safety is the big key. Target schools, that's another big piece that we've heard, work with local resource officers and the police departments to just ensure that teenagers and folks who are using e-bikes the most are getting the right education on how to use them properly. Host safety workshops, that's a big piece. The TPA's the Palm Beach TPA has been doing a great job at starting to do those across the county. And so there's an opportunity to collaborate with them in a place like Constitution Park just for safe riding, just how to properly maintain an e-bike or where you can park it or how it needs charged. Using targeted enforced zones, and that's another one that I think we've heard, just issuing warnings or citations for unsafe behavior where it's needed to continue to kind of follow that 5E. And then planning community rides and safety audits, trying to get as many people in the community involved as possible to help take away some of these unsafe behaviors and conditions, where they stem. Ooh, sorry, we're almost there, I promise. It's the biggest piece for us is the implementation plan. This is, we want to make sure that this is a living document for y'all, but not something that just sits on a shelf. So a lot of the things that are focused here towards the end in the report itself or the plan itself are really focused on how you can take all these things that that we've looked at and you can start getting them built today or find funding sources and work through that. So the two biggest pieces of that are going to be the project identification matrix, which is a screenshot here on the right, and the tracking metrics matrix, which will be the next slide. But being able to take projects that are similar or things that you're hearing from the community and to be able to grade them and put them into the mobility plan or into the project list for the mobility plan. So we've developed this spreadsheet to the right, this tool to the right that will allow for when you put certain things in, it allows everything to be weighed out and graded based on the similar standards that we used for the priority projects. And we see things like those different categories that we included, the traffic improvements, safety improvements, access, the main goals and themes that we had for the other projects. We talk about construction timelines, the planning level cost, all that's kind of taken into account to continue to build off this by establishing new projects that will continue to go online across the village. The second piece of this is, that gauging success. So understanding in the long term, right? It would be great if all these projects, once the plan was done, they were immediately built. But understanding with where we are and how much it costs to do things today, understanding what it looks like in the long term. So gauging that success based on a lot of the comments that we heard from folks across those different goals that we have. Looking at how many miles of sidewalk we have, continuing that by understanding how many people are using them, just, what that poll is that offers us to say how many people are walking or biking in the village. Taking a look at some of the statistics that are there, like the number of crashes, the number of citations, things like that, so we can understand if these are being successful and where we can continue or pivot if needed. And the action items in the implementation plan really focus on how we can continue to integrate these ideas for the mobility plan across all of the different projects, but also the different goals and some of the long-term plans that y'all are continuing to work through. And using the priority projects as that kind of starter piece to build future projects and then maintaining them and updating them in the long run. And then really focusing on leveraging those funding strategies, understanding the different grants that are available through the TPA, working through the different bike and ped funding cycles that they offer, pursuing different grants through things like the Sun Trail program. And then just, that main key of incorporating them in those long-range plans like the CIP and others that allow for these projects to be kind of put on the books at the larger scale so that the momentum can keep going. So that's where we work through kind of that funding to coordination, and in the study this is what we had shown previously to just show that kind of the life cycle of a project as we work through. And with that, I will take any questions.
Great, thank you, Alex. Appreciate that very thorough presentation. It helps. Council, open up for discussion.
No, yeah, thank you, Alex. It was very, very cool. A lot to consider there. As is the case with most cool things, they're usually expensive, so we got to figure that part out. But I think you have some really good ideas. I particularly love the river to ocean trail concept. I just think not just for kids, but adults alike. I could just see that being a really awesome resource and just kind of destination path for our village. I think we all know that the old Dixie needs some love. We've been hearing about that for quite some time. So all in all, I think everything you guys put together is very, very interesting, and I think would be a huge asset to our village. So thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I didn't realize it'd be that long. That was a lot. I appreciate it. I like thorough and at least give it to us all at once and we can chomp through this. I did make some notes. So when you keep talking about cut through traffic, that's one of my pet peeves when I watch I grew up around here in South Florida. When main roads don't function efficiently, that's when the biggest part of cut through comes through. So just keep that in mind when we start thinking about cut through, doing too much to our main roads. You had a slide up there. It was up to Cuesta Drive, Willow, and Fiesta. And again, you were talking about cut through for a third time. There was also a crosswalk outside here. But if I remember correctly from the slide, it wasn't on an intersection, so that could possibly be an extra stop for vehicles. So my concern is just be careful, and I tell this to my fellow council members, the more we add stops on a main road, the more cut through there's gonna be, because people are gonna get so annoyed. And I actually think it's more safety hazard, because the one that we have over the bridge on the west side, people have to hit a light. I still see to this day, and it's been out there for a while, people don't always stop. So I find I'm hesitant when we add more and more and more like that if it's not on actual intersections, because it's just adding more, and then for me it just trickles into more cut through. And I'm a big advocate for neighborhood roads should be neighborhood roads. They shouldn't be cut throughs. And unfortunately, I see it in our surrounding municipalities. Those back roads are being taken more because why? Their main roads are so jammed up. So just when we look at these things, and we do finally get to these points, just making sure things flow well. It's bad enough where we have 2 lanes and everything's very difficult. Shared pathways, you mentioned that when you were talking about river to ocean. What is sharing it?
Yeah, shared use or multi-use, right? So anything that's over 12 to 14 feet, I think in total is considered shared use. So it's typically bikes and pedestrians, and it is not intended to be for golf carts or low-speed vehicles. There is a little bit of debate today with things like e-bikes and scooters in particular and how those are played in. The way we've seen other places handling the same problem is that you either put that traffic on the road or you just delineate more space on the shared use path. There's a really good study in Indianapolis that came out about the signing on the ground, and just some simple tricks with different colors of line work on the ground and shared use paths to say, oh, well, yellow is for pedestrians and the blue area is for bikers and the outside is for scooters. It's an interesting study just on how you navigate different colors with staying in different space. And it's just they use simple little diagrams at the beginning. It doesn't go the whole length of the trail, but just at the beginning, and then they enforce that through kind of wayfinding across the project or across the path.
So second part question to that, parts of that trail are in Tequasta, parts are in Jupiter. I think parts are in unincorporated. The right-of-ways are going to be all different. Have you guys looked at if that would even fit?
Yes.
Without taking into people's properties?
Yes. So the only place along the River to Ocean Trail where we see a major constraint in the right-of-way space is towards Old Dixie, and particularly around the railroad track. That's where it really shrinks down in that portion of Tequesta. Everything that runs up on Riverside and then Seabrook, there is enough space there today. The way that we set it also is we just looked at what the FDM standard, the Florida Design Manual standard was for the space that's allowed between a shared use path and whatever the roadway speed is for that area. So we're not encroaching on any properties in that section, or in those sections, to answer that first question. The second caveat piece of that is the small cut across of the River to Ocean Trail does fall on the back property line to connect Riverside to Seabrook to the park. So that would be the only segment, and it's actually the only place where we have a call out for any potential cost, where there may be an easement required just to allow for that. Those parcels to the north are vacant right now, so there's an opportunity to work with the landowner on the Riverside side.
Okay.
But for the most part, across the rest, we did run a full 15% concept plan to take a look at where those entrances were. In many places, we're moving the path to accommodate large native trees that are out there today, where we have the extra space, is when we'll cut things down that are out there that are beautiful. And we accommodate the swale to at least that 5-foot minimum that's required across the
Swales, we love swales.
yeah.
So again, cost, you had a slide of multiple costs for different projects. Would that be estimated cost for Tequesta, or is that the whole project, which could be shared cost because some of these projects tie into other areas?
That's a great question. So it is the total cost.
Okay.
We did call out where that collaboration would need to be required. For any that are within Tequesta itself, right, that cost would be for y'all and you choose to collaborate with others. But for the A1A, or for Old Dixie in particular, that's the one where the cost, we call out what is most likely going to be needed to collaborate with TFT.
Last thing, because again, I've experienced myself, that left turn coming out of Bridge Road and then onto Dixie. I feel like that's gotten brought up many years ago, and it's such a delicate balance. That left turn is gold, but it's also very dangerous. So, and again, this is just a draft design. When I see that you basically take it away, and knowing our back roads, I don't know where the next back road would be when someone goes, oops, and then my concern is, and I'm just trying to prep ourselves, like what would we do? Because if people go north and they need to go south, it's very possible they're not going to go back out east. They're going to try and do a U-turn, which doesn't fit. Yeah. So I just want to look at what's the solution going to be. And you don't have to have an answer now, but that one, I think we really need to think of a solution. If we take away that left turn, again, we're cut through, and we just talked about cut through traffic. So I'd rather find a solution. Maybe there's a different structure that could be finagled in there that allows a left turn, but in a safer manner. That also might have to be something that's on Old Dixie to kind of contribute to that. But I know I've heard this before. When we take away that left turn completely, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, and so we looked at both the intersection on Old Dixie in a lot of depth for a lot of the same reasons. The left turn movement is the most dangerous movement you can make in a vehicle. It's where we see the highest amount of crashes anywhere you drive that make a left turn. It's by far the most dangerous. Part of the discussion that we had with it is maybe it's a signing piece to kind of let people know that traffic isn't there, even at the beginning of Bridge, where you're saying, well, you need to make that turn at Tequesta now, up at the intersection on US 1. We did run the turning movement for if you did a U-turn only phase. I heard you whisper that under your breath, at Tequesta Drive and Old Dixie. If we stick with the design that we did where we moved the curb out at that intersection, it fits, but not well, to your point.
Yeah,
Folks are it just takes one person to take that turn wide and knock the curb. So that's something we continue to look at. Where we had landed with it is some of the improvements on Bridge to hope to maybe make it a little more localized or a neighborhood street by adding things like on-street parking, and others will kind of cut down on the cut-through traffic in that area and kind of force drivers to innately think, oh, I've got to go up to Tequesta Drive if I'm going to make that left back onto Old Dixie. So that was the thought process behind it. But yeah, it's taking away a left turn can be very tricky. It can be very rewarding. I don't know if you want to add on that. I know you've done some.
Only because it's also very short when you turn right. There's not much space till you get to that red light, and most people are going to most likely go left to go back home. And it's not a great intersection, but it's not the only intersection that's the first one to ever have this issue. I can't imagine there isn't some creative solutions. I just know in the past this has come up with that left turn, and again, I go with flow, and that just makes everything flow one way, and it's not like it's huge above that. It just dumps right there, and my concern is what are people's reactions going to be, and then it's going to cause other issues traffic-wise.
And it's just a little too close to that Tequesta Drive intersection to
It
add
is.
another light, which creates
Well,
kind
no,
of...
I'm not saying that.
Yeah, no,
Don't put words in my mouth.
that's the other step you would go, right? Yeah, that's the other.
But the only thing I would add too is just south of that, there is available to make a left turn into that business that's on the corner. So we wouldn't be taking away that left turn to the business itself, and that actually wraps around. But when you're making a left turn into a driveway versus the street, you have a different perception. So what's happening is it's the southbound left turn that's the left turn problem. So people are merging over, speeding, and then cutting that because they're going fast in that turn. And vehicles traveling northbound might be building up speed. And so that's where you're not perceiving that, and that's where you're getting those accidents. When you're turning in a driveway, you might actually wait a little bit more and then make that turn safer. So that's one aspect of it. The other is there's two spots on Tequesta to make a right turn and then come back. There's two roads there. One is in right that splits, I think, Paradise Park with a little circle in it, and then there's another one a little bit further up, I think.
Yeah, but that's all east. I'm talking about people come out. They don't, okay.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
getting off topic.
You're saying when they want to go left-bound, so they would, if they
Yeah,
were
and
coming
then
out
also
something-
too, and I don't know which council members were up here at the time, it was talked about at council, we try to avoid cut-throughs through businesses. I mean, and again, municipalities right next door, they have a big issue with that because why? Their main roads are so congested, so
Yeah.
just keep in mind the flow and the connectivity, and when you start hindering certain areas, it just makes more of a nightmare, that's all. But thank you for all that, and then very thorough.
I'll also touch real quick on that. One of the reasons why we moved that crosswalk onto Cuesta away from Willow is because that's right where the merge is happening
It is,
westbound.
there's a curve, like a.
And then the
median.
road is curved, so we want a driver to have a line of sight to somebody crossing. That's why we pulled it out of that intersection. Now,
Gotcha.
your point is valid though. Do we need to keep it further west? Is it making another stopping point? Do we need to think, and the reason why the merge is there is because they don't want cars to back up on the train tracks. I would want to put the merge in the spot sooner so that it's already merged before they get to that intersection.
Or even match up with the driveway. I mean,
Right.
if you, however many feet over is our driveway right out here.
That's right. And so
I just
there's
find when it's so randomly placed, I find it's safety because people have to hit that button.
yeah.
And then again, you're creating more hiccups in the flow of traffic, which creates more cut through.
So maybe it needs to move in a different space.
think
You know,
about.
it could be something we could look at a little bit more. Maybe there's some more attention that could be paid where that merging is happening, looking at the
Yeah. I
volumes
mean,
and stuff.
paint's one thing, painted crosswalks are
Yeah.
one thing, but then if we're putting in those lights, I mean, that obviously is more in depth
Yeah.
than electronics, so that's why I'm saying that now, so this way we don't, maybe in near future go, oops.
Yep.
And make it right the first time.
Totally agree.
Thank you.
I think great solutions, guys. I think you raised the bar with this mobility plan. I've seen a couple over the years, and I think you really took the time to understand the village and the flow. You're able to reference these streets like you live here, right? It can get confusing, Old Dixie, alternate A1A, all these things coming through, which is which. And I think you did a great job with the solutions, and they were cost-effective solutions. I really enjoyed seeing a couple of those pieces. I want to build on Councilmember Brandon's points on the cut-through, and it's more of a question. Do you use, as we're getting more Uber, robo-taxi, delivery services, do you use technology to point these vehicles to stay on the main roads, right? Because they're all using maps.
Yeah.
If the map tells them to stay there, they're staying there. Do you guys have something more advanced than we have, just submitting to Google Maps to direct people to stay on the main roads?
I'll let you handle the moving itself. For the AV/EV technology piece, in less urban areas, a big thing that we're seeing across different towns, villages, and cities have been this focus on a singular point. And so, like the thing with Uber and Lyft, it's a little tricky, right? Especially if it has a driver, like they're gonna kind of go. They might follow where you tell them, but if you can put that traffic in one place, we find that it's been more successful, one, to actually get the ride, but also two, on the traffic piece itself. So a lot of places that we're looking at across Florida really have been focusing on where that one point can be. I'm not as familiar with the technology for AV. We do have a lot of folks who are specialized in that area. It's not mine. I know that it's gone light years. I know that they try to avoid traffic the best they can, which is where you see a lot of those issues with cut-through traffic in particular.
So a lot of them, and you touched on it, so I know you probably dealt with it before, they have an algorithm that decides, and each of the algorithms are proprietary and whatnot. But generally, if the algorithm is going to take them what they think is the fastest, and when you get the cut-throughs are often at peak traffic. And peak traffic is going to peak, and even best organized signals are they're still going to be traffic because we get an influx in the moment, and we don't design the roadways for that peak moment because that's about 15 or 20 minutes a day versus the full day. So things like the traffic calming that we were showing on Willow, or other streets, or using some of those ideas as like a toolbox for other streets, can actually offset where once those get into that piece, they're going to say, well, if you go through here, there's a delay on this road because of a traffic calming element, or the speeds on that they're measuring are always lower. So the speed onto Cuesta might be more matching that, and so that's a faster way to go. So you can kind of play off some of those elements of the algorithm. But to your original question, the best thing is that if we see a lot of cut through and it looks like it's Uber or Lyft, and it's putting a note into Waze or into Google to do that. A lot of communities have done that. But we can also, but part of traffic calming can also help play off that algorithm a little bit and kind of discourage it by saying this is going to be a low speed road any way you shake it. So, whether it's you're saving 3 seconds by doing a cut through, that goes away because you're going to have to go the speed of the road.
Okay, thank you guys, great job. I look forward to some of those solutions actually being executed.
Yes, thank you very much for the work. Great job. You said that it's important to, or Jay might have said it's important to have this mobility plan in order to collect mobility fees, right? Is that correct?
Yep.
What is the status of the mobility fee in Palm Beach County right now? Didn't Palm Beach Gardens just overturn that ruling? So now is mobility fees, are they up in the air again?
Great question. Jay, I don't know if you know more. My interaction and working with Palm Beach CPA, some have been repealed. There's several towns that have them passed and they're still in place. And there's talk about a county-wide mobility fee that could be in the next year or two. I think the bigger picture of that is looking at the overall growth in Palm Beach County, and that the money that's set aside right now for the roadways just isn't enough to cover the growth that's been happening. So, it ends up becoming a little bit of a pull, right? Like, yes, the development community doesn't like mobility fees because that's additional fees, in part of that. At the same time, how do we pay for some of these pieces that new development and new people moving here are generating? So it depends a lot on the voting public as it goes out and things like that, and kind of getting a pulse on that. But back to the mobility plan itself, to ask for the fee, to understand the need of the fee or what to ask for in that fee, you have to have a plan of the things that need to happen. And that's kind of the chicken and the egg piece here. We need to know what are these things that can help mobility into Cuesta and offset that, and then this could be the cost. So.
Keith, feel free to jump in too, but I don't think there's been a definitive ruling on the mobility fee question yet. So we're kind of in a wait and see approach. If there wasn't that kind of uncertainty, we would have already probably started on getting the mobility fee study done. We were kind of planning to do that, have this done, and then start working on the mobility fee so that it'd be ready to adopt right after the mobility plan. But we're in a little bit of a wait and see approach, kind of seeing how things shake out. And that's kind of where everybody is right now too.
Okay. And that mobility fee is on, on new development only going forward? So we'll only collect mobility fee on things going forward. Is that residential and commercial? Or is it roads? Is it anything and everything? Or?
Correct. It's residential and commercial. But if you're doing a tear down, you get a credit for the building you're tearing down. So it's typically just for new development. But the project that's coming in with the that we just annexed, right? We get mobility fees for those and other single family homes.
Okay. What is in your experience, Kittleson or Jay? What is in your experience, like what were the total number of our 3 projects, if you will? What have you seen in the past as far as TPA funding for any of that? 10%, 20%, 50%? Nothing?
So the TPA each year kind of has a call for projects or call for things that they can fund. That's dependent on the funding that they're getting from the state, from the feds, and what's coming into the TPA. And then based off that pot, they get those percentages that are in there. That's a great question. I might have to get back to you on that to understand that overall price part number. I think it varies from year to year. It also varies in terms of how many applicants they get. I will say that at least in the last year, the year before last, they only had like 2 applicants to that pool. So those 2 applicants got a little bit more than if they were, say, 10.
Okay.
So again, there's a varying amount there. I'm not sure what the percentage would be.
Okay. And the last question, in the Vision Zero, the last component to adding art, can you explain the art component to Vision Zero?
Sorry, they were 2 different bullets, I guess. Vision Zero being its own piece, and then kind of that last piece on policy is continuing placemaking in the village by keeping your character, essentially, right? So continuing to build good streets, to develop good streetscapes that are out there today.
So it wasn't art as in like art in public places or anything like that. When I saw the word art, I was just kind of wondering what that would be.
I mean, so one example is like on Tequesta, you might brand eventually the river to ocean with like a trailblazing thing there. Maybe it's signage, or not signage, or wayfinding signage, but like say you have banners on poles, things like that that start to people can see that and they connect it with Tequesta, and it's something that's very in line with the character. It's perpetuating that as a piece of these mobility things. Like there's an opportunity to go above and beyond for some of those things, if so.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. Great job. Appreciate it.
Okay, couple questions and I guess really statements. I love the tools and the implementation plan, so thank you for providing those. I think that'll really help us going forward. Of course, council will have to formally adopt this plan or decide not to adopt this plan, however that vote would go at, I'm assuming, the next council meeting. But from a staff perspective, I don't think you're asking for anything else from us tonight besides feedback, but if you need any more direction on the implementation plan, that'd be nice to know, either leading up to us formally voting on it, or if we have to workshop again. I just would like some direction there. On the public outreach, did you know where the residents lived, or was it anonymous?
So this is a good question. We added in the survey, we didn't ask for it in person. We did ask for it in person.
I did.
He did. In the survey, we asked for zip code, and then we basically, in the survey tool, doesn't allow the same URL to submit over and over. So we weren't getting responses from folks that were outside the village. So we didn't inherently ask for their. It was an option. You could put your address in. I don't think offhand if anybody did. The zip code was required, yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't really help us gauge where people live throughout the village. So I just asked because it was interesting to me that in the existing walking and biking data, everything was on the eastern side of the river, and all of the priority projects are on the eastern side of the river. And I don't know if that's because maybe there were some on the west side, but they just didn't shake out as a priority. But there might be a lost opportunity there with that river to ocean trail, or just a shared walkway, to at least connect all the way down to Tequesta Drive. Because I know so many people that ride their bikes from the west side of the river to the parks or to the beach. So I don't see why we wouldn't want to have that connectivity, because then you have the whole section west of the river that doesn't have any new connectivity to the community as a whole.
Yeah, and so there were a couple projects west of the river that were kind of like right on that lower threshold, like the 12, 13, 14, that we have identified in the projects, and they can be built out. They're in the same prioritized process. We're looking at all the same things. For the trail connection down on Riverside, right? We continued that path actually in the plan, so it's kind of implied that it could continue all the way down south to Tequesta. It's actually also on Tequesta. If you look at the larger map that we have out, you can see the path on the north side. For the connections across, though, a lot of the comments that we heard were more about certain locations and more about traffic in general and less about connectivity. So, like, one that strikes to mind is up towards Fairway, towards the north. Like, there were some comments about the intersection that's up there off County Line Road and just that's still not County Line Road, sorry. That's off of Country Club Road, sorry. Just the safety at the intersection up there. I think it only got like maybe one comment, and I think there was only one recorded crash in the last 5 years. So some of those kind of floated down, but we had 50 projects that we identified, and just the feedback that we received really focused on those 10 in particular. I do think that in the long run, and part of this is how this plan continues to grow, if adopted, is, that next step is, well, the River to Ocean Trail could connect that way, and what's the next set of projects? Even if before this one is finished, is there a way to start branding and creating those connections to the community west of the river?
Yeah, if I recall, there were a couple of requests for like some small neighborhood roundabouts on the west side around Gulfview, traffic calming on Gulfview, some connections across the bridge. And so to Alex's point, those are lower on the priority, so they didn't make the top 10. And I'll sort of joke, but let's say we build all the top 10 in the next 3 years, those can move up. New projects can also get sorted into that. And then part of that implementation matrix and tool allows to decide how new projects or pre-existing ones can start to move up each year and have others that are implemented.
That makes sense. And I did see like that confusing intersection at Country Club and North Place was on there. But yeah, I think there is I do, in my opinion, think there's a missed opportunity for a priority project to extend that shared use lane west on DeQuesta Drive until it hits Country Club. Because I think you're not allowing that western portion of the river to have that same connectivity to everything else that could be implemented in the future.
And one challenge in the country club too is that if you're going to do any kind of shared use path, you're going to have to do it in somebody's front yard, right? Everyone thinks that that's part of their property. So a lot of the places we picked were in areas where you're not really in somebody's front yard and taking that from them. So I think I had originally pushed them to kind of propose something all the way through the country club. But then I think as we talked and looked at it, I think it almost works better as just having all the pedestrian and bike activity on the street and just keeping it calm and not having to take that right away from people.
Yeah, no, that'll be a big conversation. I mean to stop it, take it through the shared use through DeQuesta Drive west and stop it at Country Club Drive. Don't go into the Country Club.
And the one piece that we worked with Jay a lot on that we didn't have a slide for the map for is kind of that low speed vehicle and like how they play together. A lot of the comments that we heard about some of the golf carts and low speed vehicles came from the Country Club area in particular. And so part of that is the overlay where we're looking at like the streets we identified that, if moving forward, where we would identify that location to be, because that was a big piece of the comments that we heard was like, we would like to ride my golf cart all the way over that way, or it would be nice to be able to have a connection. And so we worked with Jay and kind of identified that area. So it's kind of not a mobility project, but I think it is an initiative that covers them a little bit in that case. With that connectivity.
All right, and then Old Dixie does. Councilmember Painter, I think, brought this up with the Old Dixie, and it continues to pop up in every plan and survey we do. I know historically we've been very timid because of the FEC lease, but I really think we should start moving forward with some Old Dixie improvements. I know we're budgeting some for this year, so I would just want. I'm sure staff will make sure that any improvements we're going to do will kind of be phased and laid out in accordance to maybe future plans that are in this plan.
And one note on that, so we've worked a lot with FEC and Norfolk Southern and some of the other railways. The setback that we're requiring for all the improvements is what their what their minimum would be for that section. So we did from like all their standards for where the setback would be from what they allow to be close, and kept everything out of that space because it's always can be a headache going back and forth.
Okay, so your portion is out of that space.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, completely.
And I know page 64 discusses planning process and feasibility. Have these been looked at least a very high level for feasibility? Because I would hate to have like 4 of our top priorities not even be a possibility.
Yes, so all 10 of the projects we did 50% concept design with contingencies in the cost estimates, and then we had them checked just through our engineering staff, just as a kind of that first look before it continued on as it moves to its next phase of development. With 15% design, the only caveat is it doesn't include survey, so we rely off of the county records for parcel lines and things like that. So we're pretty confident in some of our conversations about where things are. And so, we made sure we weren't touching property or trying to stay within the public right of way as much as possible. So they are feasible to that 15% design.
Okay, thank you for doing that high level check. And then under the community micromobility and transit readiness, I was hoping for some suggestions in that category, especially in light of the countywide master transportation plan. Because I would like to know from the community, do they want any or do they not want any? What does our community want? So I don't know if there's still opportunity for feedback there or opinions, but I was hoping there would at least be, again, maybe some high-level suggestions in that category. And then just, this is a little nitpicky element, but there are some discrepancies with the plans that are in the priority project section versus the plans that are in the appendix. So like there's some roads that aren't labeled correctly, so if we could just clean that up before we formally adopt the plan, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Okay, council, any other comments or questions?
No, thank you.
Nope.
Thank you again.
All right, any public comment cards? Thank you. I'm gonna take public comment now.
Marie Sapiri.
Marianne has cards, so we're calling. It's okay. Mr. Bradford coming up, and then Marie, you're next.
Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail to Quest. I think I have 4 things. Number 1, if my memory serves me correctly, in 2023, the village paid for and approved the master plan by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and that has a roundabout at the intersection of Village Boulevard and Old Dixie. I'm wondering if the consultants were aware of that, if they gave it any consideration, and why they didn't propose it in this document that they're working on. Number 2, if you drive eastbound onto Cuesta Drive in morning rush hour, when also at the time when parents are taking their kids to school, noontime, lunchtime traffic, and then school pickup, 3 o'clock time frame, and then afternoon rush hour, and you're driving eastbound onto Cuesta Drive and you come to Riverside Drive, good luck to you, because it backs up traffic very badly, which makes me think at some point, probably with turn lanes. As it stands right now, the only turn lane is if you are northbound on Seabrook Road, hit at the intersection to Cuesta Drive, right there where I perk, there's a turn lane. I don't. With regard to those 2 intersections, Riverside Drive and Seabrook, they do not have, let's call it, the modern architecture for the traffic signals. So that means if you have a hurricane, you're going to have a spaghetti intersection with wires and no functional traffic lights. The steel arms that come across that you see, the steel is placed on that arm and all is inside of that arm. That's state of the art, and those 2 intersections don't have that, and they need to be upgraded to meet, like you have on Old Dixie has the arms, US 1 has the arms. They're not on those intersections. And what happens in a hurricane is that policemen or others have got to direct traffic at some point in time, because it gets real scary when people are just doing what they want to do when they want to do it. The last thing is Bridge Road intersection with Old Dixie. I really think it needs to be eastbound, one way only, because it kills 2 birds with 1 stone. The county's got a big problem. They already know that if you're on Old Dixie at the intersection with Cuesta Drive and you want to turn westbound, there's not enough stacking capability in that turn lane. And so they need to extend that turn lane further to the south, which is going to block the ability ultimately to turn left and go southbound on Old Dixie. So that's my thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick to address the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council comment. I know in the report the consultants did say that they used that, did consult that plan, and then also, correct me if I'm wrong, you did state during your presentation that the roundabout is doable. You were just providing a more cost-effective solution. Okay. Marie?
Maurice Perry, I live in a country club. There are definitely pieces of this plan I agree with. However, the mobility plan proposes relaxing parking requirements for development. You should absolutely not do this, and I recommend taking those portions out of the plan. Required parking is a vital code protection for Tequesta against overdevelopment, and preventing overdevelopment is widely supported by residents. The key driver of congestion is density. Your focus should be on not increasing density and protecting the village from too much of it. That's how you preserve the village as a small village. This is what residents have asked for over and over and over again. No one has asked for more density or bigger buildings with less parking. There should be no parking reductions or credits to developers either. Notice the push in the proposal to facilitate more development, even though this is the opposite of what residents have asked for, and also opposed to the goals of less congestion and safer streets. The proposed plan observes, quote, in the longer term, as travel demand grows, the village should collaborate with Palm Tran and explore the feasibility of limited stop circulator service or flexible micro-transit zones that can connect residents to regional transit hubs, end quote. We believe that the assumption underlying this observation is misplaced and contrary to village priorities. There is no reason to assume that travel demand grows here. To the contrary, we should prioritize creating an economically self-sufficient and healthy village so people can live in the village and so that the village is not simply a dormitory for another place. This is a key idea. Please do not support initiatives that are directed to more and bigger buildings and transport infrastructure. Instead, prioritize preserving and enhancing the vibrant daily life of Tequesta and improving the quality of development here. Saying no to bigger development does not mean no development. We should be focused on better quality development and redevelopment. Key goals to preserve the village should be 1, preserve the commercial zone as a commercial zone, require commercial use in the mixed use zone, and 3, not increasing the density. Under no circumstances should density be increased or other constraints on overdevelopment be relaxed. The mobility plan also observes, quote, the village should continue to promote compact, walkable development patterns that support local mobility, reduce auto dependency, and create inviting street frontages. The focus here on reducing automobiles is inappropriate. The focus here should rather be on reducing car congestion by not increasing the density and preserving the code provisions that limit building size and density. Notice in this plan and in the later issues that we'll see at this meeting, there is a push to relax parking limitations. You should absolutely preserve the parking limitations in the code, as this is a vital constraint against overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Mary Ann, any other public comment? Ms. Watkins?
Good evening, everyone. Pat Watkins, 167 River Drive. My only comment here, I have not studied this thing, and there's a lot in here. I'm just concerned with the money and the time and the effort that's been spent over the last few years doing our sidewalks, planting trees, what's already there. I would hate to see you come behind that and rip that up, whatever the plan is. And in talking about Old Dixie, the left turn lane, I've been coming west off of Bridge, has always been a nightmare. That certainly something needs to happen here. But the lighting between Tequesta Drive and Village and on maybe up to County Line Road even, please consider that with whatever's going on with Old Dixie. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, any other council comment?
No, thank you.
Just one regarding the Old Dixie area, in reference to the public comment made. I think when we do partnerships with county, because that's a county road, looking at the stacking of that turn lane, because that is absolutely true. And then that kind of causes that center lane to fill up, and that's where some confusion comes to. So maybe they can help with figuring out how to create a more efficient turn lane as well. That's all.
All right, great. Thank you, Kittleson and Jay. Appreciate it. All right, moving on. Agenda item 2, discussion on FPL SolarTogether program. Doug.
Good evening. It's just a quick introduction to FPL SolarTogether program. FPL introduced us to this program in 2021, that they were rolling the program out, and we've been on a waiting list since 2021. We now have an opportunity to participate in this potential savings. And Basically what we're doing is an investment in FPL's solar program. And we would transfer about 45% of our electricity from the main grid to solar energy. And it's important that we don't confuse the 45% savings, right? The savings is energy. Energy is transferred to solar power. You do not get the same savings in our pocket. So initially there's a subscription fee to invest in this program. And the fee is a fixed rate of $106,673 per year. And in doing that, we receive bill credits. We receive back, based on the energy that we're moving to the solar grid, we receive back $101,955. So in the first couple of years in the program, if we were getting to the program, there's a cost to be in the program. So when you look at the subscription fee minus the credits, in year one, we have a $4,700 cost. And then year two is $2,600. Year three is a $673 cost. And then year four is $527 cost. In year five is our break even, where we're making money in the program. I'll let you know up front, it is extremely modest return on investment, right? We spend $600,000 a year on electricity with FP&L. Half of that is the water plant, and the other half of that is all the other departments. So when we look at our return on investment for a financial perspective, it's a small return, right? It basically grows, it continues to grow. The costs don't change. The subscription fee doesn't change, the bill credits don't change, our kilowatt rate doesn't change. So when we look at it over 10 years, we're putting back in our pocket, a net of $11,450. That will continue to grow over time, and the hope would be that in the future, we're moving more of our electricity to the grid, and that possibly the net savings and net cost will continue to increase over a period of time. But it is a long-term investment. It's hard to see what's going to happen in 10 years. There is no hard obligation. There's no agreement that we have to sign with FP&L to get into the program. We can drop out at any time. However, on the flip side, FP&L can change this program at any time as well, right? The way I look at this, initially there is a cost. I'm hopeful that they're going to continue to build solar energy, maybe even mix in hydrogen. I know they're building a hydrogen plant up north as well. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to transfer more and more electricity to the grid, which in turn will turn into savings for the village. Again, you're looking at it financially, it's not a huge savings at all in our pocket. But we have this opportunity now. Like I said, we've been waiting for 3 years. Don't know if we pass on this opportunity, when it would come back to us again. So we just wanted to, manager and I wanted to present this to you tonight, kind of get a feel for it and how you wanted to move forward. Now's the time. We have about 30 days to participate in this program. If we don't, they bypass us and they move along. This is also an opportunity that we can share with the residents and the businesses in Tequesta as well. They can participate in this program as well, but it'll be based on their costs and their savings will be based on their actual annual usage for their home or for their business. So I know people are participating in the program as well. So just wanted to get some feedback and what y'all thought, whether you thought it was a good opportunity to jump on this program now, or we wait a couple of years and see if it comes back our way.
Thank you, Doug. Council?
Someone else can lead if you
Yeah,
like.
no, I guess, yeah.
Oh, I'm just disappointed that's what the return is after 10 years.
Pretty low.
It's misleading when you look at all the literature in the brochure. So when this program was first rolled out to me, and that's part of the reason I pulled it last month. I was waiting for our FP&L reps to call me back. You looked like you had, a substantial savings up front in the first couple of years. And then when we finally got the numbers back, no, it's 45% of your electricity usage going to the grid, not in your pocket. So you're investing in their solar grid. You're helping them build the solar grid.
And I totally get that. And obviously we hope it gets better and the return will probably increase over time. But what we have in front of us right now are the facts. So what we've been looking at, and that's a long time to even make the money back. So
it's a long-term investment.
I'm hesitant to do that right now.
Just a question, if you don't know the answer, totally fine, just for my own edification mostly, but do we know of any other local municipalities who've taken advantage of this or are doing it?
They gave me a list of about 3 or 4.
That are in
3 or 4 municipalities
okay.
throughout the state, yeah. there weren't a lot, but like I said, they're just rolling this out now to the municipalities.
Okay.
Are those larger
It's more for
municipalities?
sustainability, you know,
Yeah.
we're protecting the environment. This is, right now, this is more for sustainability, you know, we
And
can
Yeah, as is the
claim
case
credits.
with a lot of, you know, like, not to compare this to FPL undergrounding, but it's almost one of those things, if you wait it out with FPL, it seems to get better or free, or however you want to look at that. So right now, I'm not crazy about it for the same reasons you aren't.
Which you could see eventually, you know, when you get into years 7 and 8 and so on. Every 3 to 4 years or 3 to 5 years, FPL increases our rates. And this could potentially offset those little increases that we have every few years, every 3 years or so. That's another way you could look at it.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Once,
know on
once you
this.
jump in the program though, you know,
Yeah.
you want to get your money back and you're in the program.
Yeah.
I'm gonna know on this program. I do like the idea, but as an investment, I don't think that we can consider it that. Our assumed rate of return for our pension funds are 6.5%, and so unless something meets that, I don't think that is a wise idea to call it an investment. If they want to discount their stock and sell it to us, then that may be something we can consider. For a marketing effort, I don't think it's necessary at this point. People do understand solar. My entire home and cars are powered by solar. And I do enjoy some flexibility, but it's definitely not a cost savings. And just looking at that 10-year net savings and trying to read their literature, I think they need to go back, unless they did it on purpose for their marketing efforts, because it's extremely confusing.
Yeah.
I do like the idea, and I appreciate you presenting it. As far as how it was initially laid out, and when you really dig into it, I don't think that's a wise investment for us at this time.
Yeah, I echo what my colleagues have said, but so you said we pay about $600,000 a year in electricity? Plus, so we'll pay $600,000 plus an extra 106,673. So we're out of cash.
Well, you're getting, so out of the 106,000 subscription fee, you're getting back a bill credit of 101,000. So out of pocket is $4,700.
Over the course of a year.
Over the course of the year.
But do we pay the subscription fee up front?
Right.
So we pay 100, so we will be going
You're
for
not
six.
actually paying money because you're getting the credit. So the only out of pocket is the 4718.
It's the most
Right.
confusing, misleading
Yeah.
thing I've ever seen. So I don't know, for 27 years I did I don't know, I think I did pretty well in high finance, but I don't see the benefit of this. I'm still confused. I don't even know what we're doing, so no, I'm a no.
Yeah, I align with everyone else. It just, with the facts today and the net return, it just doesn't seem worth it. Like you say, we don't know what the future holds. The return could get better down the road, or FPL could cancel a program down the road. So we don't know those. But yeah, not in favor of this time.
Thank you, Doug.
Comment cards? Nope. Any public comment? Nope. All right, thank you, Doug.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Doug.
it.
We appreciate you digging in on it, though. Thank you.
Yes. Agenda item 3, consideration of a ballot question for a general obligation bond for purchase of 1 Main Street. Jeremy?
So this item, council previously workshopped in August. As part of the discussion, staff would further develop this plan and propose bond language. We have put together a description of the property, put together some conceptual ideas that some of you guys have seen some of those. We also revised the 2015 plan that kind of mirrors much of the comments that I've heard recently. And then leaving the August workshop, staff investigated the parking issue and continues to look at the parking issue, and it's very complicated, and I've shared some of that with you guys. It is in the staff report, but we met with the adjacent property owners of 250 Tequesta Drive, which is the Wells Fargo building, and the 1 Main Street building, which is Topper Fitness and Harvey School and the likes in that property. And the owners did provide some parking agreements that they had. The Wells Fargo building, we knew of the 21 spaces that were going to be required, but we were not aware of there was an agreement that was done for the 1 Main Street parking, basically saying that the future owner of the property could not, they need to keep that 1 Main Street building in compliance with parking code, which creates a whole issue, future development or future use of that park. As we've done some digging, and it's still pretty preliminary, but that parking, or that one Main Street building needs somewhere in the ballpark, and we're of 100 parking spaces. And right now, even with the use of Main Street and their parking, they have like 40. So the future owner has to keep them in compliance with parking. It's not a definite number, but it's going to be somewhere close in that ballpark. And so, one of those parcels right now is keeping them in conformity. So the future owner can't take them out of conformity. And I know Jay's been digging through every single document that we have. We've even called, previous planners, and so we're still looking at it. I know Keith hasn't really dug into too much of it yet either, but we are sure that that those agreements are in place. We have passed that on to the appraiser. As you guys know, coming out of that meeting, the developer had an appraisal done for that property at $9.8 million. They said they would sell it to the village for $8.8 million, knowing this these parking issues. We have shared that with the appraisal yet. We are expecting to get that by the end of the week. So the timing, this conversation, we can't count on that appraisal and what that will devalue those properties at, if anything. It's up to the appraiser to decide, but we're pretty sure it will not come out at $9.8 million as previously appraised. And then as we continue to have this discussion about the bond, keep this property until the village can put this out for a referendum. And so part of the agreement was that we would lease the property for 1 year. Originally we discussed 100,000. As we've started to negotiate, now they want 125 for the lease of the property for the year. We have not. We started with an agreement. We are still working on that with the developer to come up with the right language. And so moving forward, just for council to give, we need description and the language of the bond, direction, working with legal for the lease agreement, and then to lease the property for 1 year, and any other direction council on this item. With that, you have my answer any questions you may have.
Jeremy, council?
I have a few comments. I like the opportunity on the table. There is an opportunity on the table for a valuable piece of land in Tequesta. There's only really 2 left. I think we're very far away from coming to any agreement, not only on price, but some of the language as well. And so I'd like to continue the conversations with the owners. I think they're a good group to have those conversations and negotiate with. As I mentioned in a meeting previously, I think the 9 million or the 8.8 were far away just on price, and then the details on it as well. Now we're even farther away knowing about the parking. So if that comes down in value or other logistics, that I don't know, but I would like to continue the conversation. In its current form, I'm not in favor of this deal as it sits, and not even going through the bond language, just the deal itself. But I would like to continue that conversation, see what the owner gives us, see what the appraiser says, the secondary, obviously the timing that it's not here tonight. To continue that conversation would be my main priority.
Yeah.
Can I add one comment real quick just to help wrap mine up? We don't have to make it, obviously we don't have to make a decision tonight, but November 13th would be our November council meeting. That's when the deadline is to have the bond language, 75 words over, because it does need to be in by the first week of December. So that's our deadline that we're working with.
I'll say unfortunately, I do echo Councilmember French's sentiments. I really loved this when it first came out. I thought it was an awesome opportunity. Really love that we were putting the decision essentially into the hands of our residents, and us included, and for such a significant, pieces of property, significant parcels. But as of last week, hearing the news with the parking and essentially getting 2 parcels, not really getting 3 because we're giving up almost, if not an entire parcel for parking, unless the price were to just significantly decrease. And even then, I think we'd have to see how it would work. I just think we gotta wait, first of all, see what the appraisal comes, and even if that comes in low, that takes a seller who's willing to meet us somewhere in a reasonable place. I think the language, if we did go to the bond referendum, I think the language is there, maybe with a few tweaks, but I think all in all, I think it's pretty good. But I mean, I can't stress enough how much I wanted this to work, and I'm not saying it won't. But right now, I don't feel super comfortable with it. But not to say that couldn't change if a few facts and circumstances change up until November. But right now, just not loving the overall deal for our village.
I have a question. It's kind of a legal question regarding the parking, and it's a total hypothetical question, so I can have a very well-rounded, futuresque decision when we go down this path. Hypothetically, if another developer comes in and buys the 3 parcels, plus the building that's technically in the 4th parcel, and maybe another one, does that, because it's one owner, does that completely remove the shared parking agreement? Not the Wells Fargo building.
No, the parking agreements are in effect to anyone that owns those properties.
So even if all 4 were completely demolished and started over fresh?
So the 21 spaces would be in effect for the Wells Fargo building if all 4 were demolished. If all 4 were demolished, the ones that are required to be provided for the Italiano Harvey School would go away.
Okay, and then again, hypothetical, Wells Fargo gets purchased out, as well as the Toppers Fitness Building and the other 3 parcels. Does that completely wipe away the parking agreement? If they started fresh over, demolished everything? Because it might change the use of the property.
If I'm understanding you correctly, is the question, so you have a parking agreement, an agreement requires 2 parties to, so your hypothetical question is that if somebody comes in and buys the whole thing. So then the agreement would be with themselves.
Right, so is that?
Yes, if the same person owned everything, the parking agreements, then there's no longer a purpose for it because it's only one person owns it.
That's what I understood. I just want to make sure we all hear that.
If I'm understanding your question correctly.
Okay, that is correct.
Because I want to clarify, because I had the same question, but say someone were to buy just the current One Main Street building where Toppers Fitness and everything is, and they don't purchase the vacant parcels, and that building is demolished and rebuilt, would the shared parking agreement go away then?
Then there's still
21.
For Wells Fargo, you
Yeah.
have that, but it would reduce, I mean, the bulk of the shared parking's with that property. The One Main Street
that's the
property.
21
correct?
spaces that would
remain.
Away, right?
The 21 is the Wells Fargo, the
40.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right, so
40
if that
spaces.
building were to get redeveloped, would that shared parking agreement go away then? Or would it still convey?
Well, let me just say this to help Keith while he's thinking. The first part of this legal thing is those agreements never been filed. Well, one of the agreements has never been filed with the court or with the county, and so we're still exploring the legal part of that too. So mind you that now you can answer that. That's bought you some time.
That's a question of I enter into an agreement and I don't, and the intent is to have that run with the land, be a condition. You got to put the rest of the world on notice, and if they didn't do that, then there would be a legal issue between any subsequent buyer, because they could say, well, I never knew about that, you never told me about that, I did my due diligence, it wasn't recorded in the public records, how am I supposed to know?
Okay.
So so then they fight about that forever.
I will say though that we do have some stuff in our files showing that some of the spaces from that building were used the spaces off-site were used for that building to provide the required parking.
Okay, so.
Does that make sense?
So there was some actual notice?
Yeah.
Regardless of?
Yeah, whether or not there was a recorded covenant, there was some site plan activity that essentially showed that those spaces were being allocated from village parking requirements to meet the minimum parking requirements for that building.
That makes it a little more complicated.
Exactly.
But I mean, essentially, as long as there are two parties, then the agreement stays in place. Whether it's valid and whether there's defenses against enforcing it, put that aside. But as long as there's two different owners, an owner on one side of the agreement and an owner on the other side, then it would stay in place.
Okay. Last thing, I've gotten feedback since our last meeting. There was some feedback I got that was interesting, and I think it's fair. And as I consider it, I don't want us to go down a rabbit hole tonight, because a big part of this for me is that appraisal. Because every time I try to think of my decision, it always comes down to, well, what is it going to cost us? And honestly, I'm really just stuck until I get that appraisal, so we can compare it to the sellers and then maybe further those conversations with the seller and see where that gets us. And I feel like that is going to give me a more educated, well-rounded, even response of where we're at. I would actually like to ask for, when we do get the appraisal, if we were to do a special meeting just for this topic, and then that, because we've done that before, and then that way, as soon as we get it, we can set up the meeting, we can knock this out and really maybe come to a consensus with all the information and facts at hand. Just for me, that appraisal missing is a big puzzle piece.
Yeah. Can I ask one quick question? We do have the seller's appraisal, they provided that. Does it take into account any of the parking, like ours will on Friday? No. Okay. Thank you.
Again, I think that's going to complicate a conversation back and forth
Yeah.
with both appraisals not really being equal. So
Yeah.
I kind of really need that piece.
I agree. And I mean, I'm sorry to jump back in here, but I just want to say, I understand the risk of this. This could ultimately, the hypothetical you're talking about could happen. Somebody could buy the whole thing. We still do have Main Street running right down the middle, right? So the whole point of this, the reason for the excitement, at least from my standpoint, was to give the village control. Not control, that's not the right word. Control the destiny of these parcels for our village. And there are risks with us not owning this. A smart enough developer could figure out some stuff to do on this property these properties that we would not like. But I agree with what you said. I just don't think right now the information is there. And even once we have the appraisal, it takes two people to agree upon it that they don't have to agree to. We may think it's worth X and they may disagree. But right now I just can't get behind paying the price, for 3 parcels, but we're really only getting the value of 2, essentially. And that does, we're gonna have to get all this off-site parking that we need to accommodate, and then there's gonna be a bunch of parking that we're gonna need for the properties as well. So I just think you're right. I think there's just more information, and I am 100% in favor of a special meeting if that'll get us prepared for the next council meeting in November. This is an important decision, so I think we need to have as much time to talk about it as we can. So I'm 100% in favor of that.
Sorry, I'm done.
When this came up, I too was extremely excited we had the ability to put Paradise Park, under the village control. I thought it'd be a great use of the potential bond that we talked about 3 years ago, and that unfortunately that bond issue for a number of different reasons didn't pass. But that would have been a great opportunity at less than half the price of what it might be selling for today. As much as I'd like to make it a park, making that happen and making that a reality is going to be tough. We've talked about the discounted value based on the parking. In communications with some residents, was under the impression it could be as high as 72. So for that, I apologize. But looking at what we have here in our staff report, it could be as high as 61. I've also heard that the unrecorded parking agreement was based on the occupancy at that time. And if that were to change, it could go up or go down. So that's another thing that is yet to be determined. That's why it could go as high as 72, that's my understanding. I've also had conversations with one of the building owners and who said that with village sponsored, not village properties, not village events, but village sponsored properties, that they aren't that excited about just jumping back in and giving the parking lot, one of the 3 lots for parking for that. So if we do have anything, if we were able to work out something for the 2 grass parcels, it'd have to be a totally passive park with no parking. Because my understanding, at least for one of the owners, they wouldn't even consider allowing us to use the parking lot. They want to take whatever spots are theirs to be theirs 24/7, 365 days a year. If we take it back, we take $65,000 in tax revenue off the rolls. We need to consider that if it were to be developed, and I'm not advocating to develop this property, but if it were to be developed, it obviously would be more than $65,000 a year. We take it, for us to do, we will be getting 2 parcels roughly for the price of 3, or 2 parcels for the price of 3, giving up that tax roll. And don't forget, while the 1 penny sales tax has nothing to do with ad valorem, there'll be things that we will need to pay for that has perhaps did come out of that 301 fund. If I'm not mistaken, it's a 301 fund. But $500,000 a year is going to go away. Other than this subject parcel, there's only 1 more of substance in the village off County Line Road. And we want to keep our police and our fire independent. There's talk of real estate taxes going away, or some form or fashion. They go away and sales tax goes up, whatever that will be. And if we did acquire all 3, this parking lot is probably the worst looking parking lot I've ever seen. And we need to do something with it. I mean, it's not striped. There's potholes. There's I would imagine on the site plan when it was originally submitted, it was to be a little bit nicer looking than that. I think we owe it to the property owners to do that. So right now, as much as I want to make this Paradise Park the Villages, for all the reasons I just talked about and other things, well, anybody that's in the back, we had a whole map tonight of the back of the country club, which does not include mobility to the west side of the bridge. Was anybody that's in the back of the country club going to walk, ride a bike, do something if there's no parking to come to this side to Weston to do it? I think you have a big voting block in the back of this where they might say no. It's up to the village, it's up to the residents and the voters to say whether or not they want to. We're asking them, do they want to buy it, yes or no? We're not making that decision. We're giving them the opportunity to make that decision. And I have not had a conversation with anybody in the country club. I've had 2, and they were not in favor of this. I don't think it's necessary, much less the distance with no potential parking to get there without really adequate mobility yet within the village. So I'm struggling with this, but right now I got to tell you, I'm not in favor of this. I'm not advocating building on it, but in its current stage, I think to take this over, we're just putting in ourselves to limit some type of potential revenue in the future from a tax perspective. And we've got to be good neighbors. I think the people that have these parking agreements have played very nice in the sandbox, and it sounds like now they're just a little bit tired of that, and we could potentially have 2 grass lots with nothing that we can park on, and I have a concern with that. So right now, I got to tell you, I'm not leaning forward. It would be interesting to find out what the appraisal is, and I would be willing to have a special meeting to give some finality to this, but we are under a time crunch to get a ballot language ready, prepared, and everything by November 13th. So I just don't see how we can do this, and so right now I got to tell you, I'm not in favor of it.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. First of all, I want to say I'm not okay with the annual lease cost being increased by another $25,000. I don't know why they felt the need to do that, since it was presented to us at $100,000 at the last meeting. I do know the appraisal's pending, but maybe it comes in less. That gives us some negotiating power, but I would be shocked if the current property owner is going to come down that drastically. Like maybe there'll be some wiggle room depending on what ours comes in, but I can't imagine like millions and millions will be shaved off. I have a real hard time. Say staff finishes their research on the shared parking matters. And if we do have to provide up to 61 spots, I think it's very unjust to use taxpayer dollars for a whole parcel that is benefiting only the adjacent private property owners and not the taxpayers. Like, that is a very hard line for me. I don't think that's wise for us to put that out there, knowing that potentially a whole parcel our taxpayers aren't going to be able to benefit or use. So that's a big one. We'll see, any more research you guys do on the shared parking, but I kind of align with Vice Mayor that it's just not. It sounded great in the beginning, but with more of this information coming out, it just does not seem justifiable at this point to do that. I still have the question on if we were to move forward with this, we need to maybe prioritize some of our other park projects. Like we potentially are moving forward with a local bill for DeQuesta Park. If that were to move forward and be successful, does invest in money in that property versus potentially investing money in Paradise Park, we would really need to kind of prioritize those, especially DeQuesta Park is a pretty hefty dollar bill for the improvements that our community told us that they wanted there. I had the same question at the last workshop. The park purchase policy is attached again. Are we complying? Do we need to comply with that? I don't know why we wouldn't, because a waste of putting a policy together. But there's a section for specific property characteristics and analysis of the unique park purposes possible for potential acquisition is made by assessing cultural, ecological, and recreation attributes of each parcel. I don't know if that's been completed. Does that need to be completed? And if so, at what phase would that be done so we're complying with our policy? I think, if this were not to pan out, I want to just remind everyone that we spent a lot of time and money on these corridor master plans for, including this corridor, Beach Road, our parks master plan, and we got tons of public input on how they want to see the village grow. So I think we have very great plans in place, which we'll be talking about a little bit on the next agenda item because at SB 180. But we have these really good plans in place to show us, to guide us on how future development should look like and how that should go in the village. And the fact that the public was a huge part of putting that together, I think we need to remember those tools are in place. And I hope this doesn't become, we want to buy this parcel just to stop development. Because we have plans to grow in a smart way that really maintains the fabric and character of our community. Otherwise, why do we waste all the money on putting those plans together? So I just want to keep that in mind. Should this not pan out, we really should stick to the plans that we already have in place that, had a ton of public input. On the bond language, the one question I had there, it says to acquire and develop, and maybe it's to be determined, but would we ask for a bond for the land amount, or would we add more money to that to cover future development?
So that wasn't contemplated when we put this together for the $9 million. It was based on the $8.8 million sale price when we got it. So we threw in the $9 million to cover bond cost and any other costs that we may have associated, soft costs.
But not development. So I would, maybe it says acquire, develop, and improve, so it maybe should just say acquire. I guess to be determined if it moves forward, and we'd want to add more money to that, but I don't know if it's smart to just add more money on top of land value if we don't really have a plan and numbers together for what would actually be developed there. And then the only other thing, maybe this is more of a Keith question, it says including an theater, pavilion. I wonder if we should say such as instead of including all these. So we might want to say such as, so it's or what potentially could go there. That was my only input on
I think I did get a similar comment from, you're pointing at yourself, Mr. Mayor, I think.
Attorney.
He asked me to change that language, and I said it was something we could consider, so.
Okay, that's all I have. Any other comment? Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one. I don't know that they don't need a vote until November, so we could talk about it at our, likely not in October,
September 29th.
September 29th. So we could just talk about it again then and then see where we're at and then
Let's do that.
vote in October. And that's still a month ahead of schedule.
It's a good plan.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Any comment cards?
Marisa Perry.
Marisa Perry, I live in the country club. I am in favor of acquiring this land and putting it to use as a park. I am, however, extremely doubtful of the sincerity of the owner's intentions after having reviewed the parking situation. And I would like them to explain how they propose to fix it before a sale, because it's their job and not ours. And if they don't have a plan to fix it, then I think their proposal is disingenuous. Here are my recommendations. For 1 Main Street, the cause of the problem for 1 Main Street, as I understand it from the backup, and also for the Tequesta Corporate Center, is that these properties are short of parking spaces and not in compliance with code requirements. That appears to have been by design in the case of 1 Main Street. The building there appears to have something like 24 parking spaces, and it seems doubtful that it was in compliance even when it was built in 2001. To remedy the lack of parking for 1 Main Street, its owner entered into a private agreement with the owners of Paradise Park when it was sold for a private shared parking agreement. This agreement is not binding on future buyers of Paradise Park. If the current owners want to sell to the village, they will have to enter into an agreement with the 1 Main Street owner to nullify it before the village purchases the park. Under no circumstance should this be the responsibility of village taxpayers. And under no circumstance should the village release any of the property owners from their obligations and parking requirements under the code. A necessary precondition of the village purchase must be that the seller has contracted with 1 Main Street to resolve the parking and sell Paradise Park without any parking for 1 Main Street. Moreover, this situation should serve as an additional lesson not to allow shared parking agreements going forward. The parking requirement is a critical constraint on overdevelopment. Tequesta Corporate Center, it is not clear from the memo whether the parking easement for 21 spaces is a binding agreement that runs with the land. If it is, there should be a condition of sale that the current owners buy out the TCC's right to this easement prior to the village's purchase. And the village's purchase price should reflect that. If the TCC refuses, the village would have recourse to the eminent domain for legitimate public use to remove the easement. Eminent domain would give the TCC owner market value via the legal system. So it's in the TCC's best interest all around to agree to the buyout from the current owners in this situation. Furthermore, it's not clear from the memo whether the TCC is out of compliance with village code parking requirements or when this easement was entered into. It is important for this discussion to ascertain when this easement was executed and what the purpose was for it. It is not clear that this easement brings the TCC into compliance with the parking requirements anyhow, but even if it did, it should never be the case that two private parties can contract away a code requirement that applies to one of them without the village's agreement, which should not be given because it creates this type of mess. The code requirements protect public values, and this is illustrated starkly here. Thank you.
Marsha? I'll pass.
Any other cards, Marianne?
No other cards.
No. Any other public comment? Mrs. Watkins?
I just wanted to thank you all for taking a breath here. This is a complicated property, both from a developer standpoint and the village standpoint. It's not a clear-cut issue. The cross-parking agreements seem to be cloudy at best to straighten out. The appraisal is absolutely a must to have, because when you have a property like that that doesn't have clear issues going on to straighten out, the value certainly doesn't hold constant. And anyone who wanted to even buy that property at this point is going to be under the same constraints the current developer is. The village itself will have issues with it. If the appraisal comes in or the council decides to go forward in any form, even if it's a much lower amount, I would really beg you to please somehow get word out to the residents exactly what's going on here. That property, whatever its issues are, clearly spelled out, the cross parking, whatever needs to be explained to them fully. And hopefully they come. I'm amazed with the council even considering language for a $9 million bond. We don't have anybody here. shouldn't be surprised. This is how it goes. We can't force them to read or to participate, but it's a very big issue. So any information that could go out, written, internet, whatever, to try to encourage them to understand exactly what you're looking at, should you go forward in any way with this possibility. We all would love to see that parcel in the village, but not at this current price, obviously, and with clear definitions of what, not only what you're buying, but what your future plans are, what you might do with it, should you have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Nope. All right, moving on. Agenda item 4, discussion on Senate Bill 180. Jay or Keith?
Good evening, Jay Hutch, Community Development Director. Got a fun one for you here. Senate Bill 180. Explained.
Enough said.
That's my presentation. Okay, so Senate Bill 180 was signed into law on June 26, 2025, and it places significant limitations on the ability of local governments to adopt or enforce regulations. Under Senate Bill 180, any municipality located in a county with a federal disaster declaration for these hurricanes is subject. Because we were in the disaster area for Milton, the provisions apply to the village of Tequesta. So a summary of the restrictions, it prohibits impacted local governments from imposing any moratorium on development. What really impacts us is number 2, municipalities and counties are not allowed to adopt any more restrictive or burdensome amendment to its comp plan or land development regulations. Or adopt any more burdensome procedure relating development. The best part of it is that they applied it back to August 1st of 2024 retroactively, and it remains in effect through October 2027. The law explicitly states that any such moratorium shall be null and void ab initio. Is that correct? Is that the right pronunciation, Keith? Okay. The Latin term for that means from the beginning. So that indicates that the affected ordinances are treated as if they were never even adopted. Staff's analysis.
Can't wait to see our analysis.
So the impacted ordinances for us are, we've adopted quite a few ordinances in the past, since August 1st, 2024. The main ones, of course, are going to be the zoning overlays, the zoning map changes, which adopted the overlays, our living shorelines and seawalls code, and our multifamily parking and loading. So those 4 definitely apply. Keith and I and Jeremy have looked at these, and we think that the live local and construction hour ordinance and vacation rentals ordinance would not be null and void, so those will remain in effect, but the other 4 are impacted. So the next steps are to repeal the 4 impacted ordinances. We can readopt any versions of the ordinances that are not more restrictive than previously existing regulations. In the case of the zoning overlays, it's a pretty limited number of things that could be readopted. And so what staff's proposing is that we could repeal the 4 ordinances, and then if council wanted to, we could bring back any of the things that aren't impacted by this ordinance into this master code update that we're doing. We've got quite a few other code updates we have to make just related to legislation from the past session. We had a few glitch things that we brought to council earlier this year. So we could roll it into another code, which will take us a few months. We could also wait a few months to repeal those ordinances. I know right now, and Keith could probably talk about this more, there are some cities trying to, considering challenging this. And then I think the League of Cities is likely going to take it up. So we could kind of take a little bit of a wait and see approach and kind of see what shakes out over the next few months. And I think Jeremy mentioned some indications that this legislator might take it up at the next session and repeal parts of it. So we could kind of take a little bit of a wait and see approach and see what happens. That's it.
Keith, do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure I can shake my head better than those guys. I mean, Jay's analysis in terms of Senate Bill 180's direct effect on the work this council and staff have done in the last year or so is accurate. In terms of going forward, there is there are plans by a law firm out of Miami-Dade to file a lawsuit challenging the legality of Senate Bill 180. They're looking for local governments to sign on the cost, I think, is, and I feel like I'm in a poker tournament, but it's like a $10,000 buy-in and then additional $5,000 payments depending on where the case might go. If it was appealed to a district court of appeal, I think there would be additional cost. If it was appealed all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, there would be additional cost. You all remember substantively this has nothing to do with it, but you remember the Form 1, Form 6. All right, that's been in litigation for over a year, and it's really gotten nowhere yet. It's still sitting out there. So, and the only reason I remind you of that is that litigation not only will cost money, it will take a long time to weave itself through the court system. It's just the nature of the beast. So I don't know. I know the lawsuit has not been filed as we sit here tonight. I don't know how many cities have passed resolutions deciding to join if it gets, or when it gets filed. So that's one path that is being contemplated this afternoon. I also received correspondence from the Florida League of Cities, and I think this went to the Municipal Attorneys Association membership, but the league has already begun drafting proposed revisionary legislation to work towards some meaningful amendments to the Senate Bill 180 legislation. Just looking over them briefly this afternoon before I had to leave and come here. The proposed amendment text does things like the entire state of Florida is affected by Senate Bill 180 the way it's written. It was written under the guise of emergency management. Well, it's only if you are in a declared emergency zone. Well, the way they wrote it, it's every county in the state. Make no mistake, there's nobody that's not touched by the way it was written. So one of the proposed amendments that was drafted in this early version of an amendment changes it to within 100 miles of the core of the storm, whatever the terminology is, but it really drills it down to truly properties that were impacted by storm damage. I mean, the whole point of this theoretically was that if you were in a hurricane situation and your property was damaged, the state didn't want the local government to be able to come in after the fact, change the development regulations to make it a lot more expensive for you to rebuild your property and not be able to get insurance covered. That was sort of the sell, but that's not what ended up on the books, as we all know. So that's one of the amendments that the league is going to try to propose. Another one would be to get rid of that would be to define burdensome and what's the other term, Jay, that it uses? Burdensome or restrictive, actually define that. There's no definition for those in the current legislation. But it would, under the amendment, well, it would, like I said, I wish I had a chance to really digest this a lot more more than I did. It does propose to take out the burden, either define it or take out the burdensome and restrictive language. It compresses timeframes from a 1-year timeframe to a 6-month timeframe in terms of the moratoriums and the more restrictive or burdensome amendments. It proposes to take out the attorney's fee provision. It changes the idea that the ordinances that were adopted would be void from the beginning, and it restructures the prohibition to an enforcement issue, from an enforcement standpoint. So the net result there is you wouldn't have to repeal anything, you just maybe wouldn't be able to enforce certain more burdensome or restrictive regulations against actual properties that were touched by that more well-defined and tightened up core area that's within 100 miles of where the core of the storm actually went through. So not my best description ever of what the league is trying to do. Like I said, I just got it this afternoon. I can get you a much better description this week. So that is another path. The league is already working on this. So in addition to the litigation path, there is a legislative path that is already being worked on, which would presumably be heavily lobbied and try to get pushed through the legislature in this upcoming session. You all are very aware of the legislative process. That takes some time as well. Probably not as much time as litigation. So 2 other issues that in terms of would be better to litigate, would be better to legislate, would be better to not do anything and take a wait and see approach. So on the litigation issue, and I'll refer back to the Form 6 lawsuit as well. You'll all recall there are a handful of named plaintiffs in that lawsuit. However, the temporary injunction that the court granted, the court exercised its discretion and applied that to everybody in the state, whether you're a party to the lawsuit or not. So on that issue for this Senate Bill 180 litigation, so there will be jurisdictions that sign on, and there will be jurisdictions that don't. So then the question comes, well, will it only apply to the people who signed up or are named parties in the lawsuit, or will it apply statewide? Under the current law in the state of Florida, again, that will be a decision that the judge would make, just like it was in the Form 1, Form 6 lawsuit. I can't think of a reasonable purpose for a court to not apply whatever decision it makes statewide. I don't know why a court wouldn't do that. I'm not a judge and I'm not sitting on the bench hearing this case, but it just seems to me the way the law is written, it applies, as I said, it applies to every county in the state the way it's written. So why would you not apply your ruling statewide as well? If I was a betting man, I would believe that a reasonable court would do that, whether you sign on to the litigation or not. I think you would probably benefit or suffer from the decision that the court makes, and it'll be applied statewide. So, Which path? Those are how I'm aware of the two roads going forward as we sit here tonight. You could, if you decide you want to join the lawsuit, I will prepare the appropriate resolution and bring it back to you to adopt, and that would memorialize your decision, memorialize your agreement to make those fee payments, and you would be a named party in whatever lawsuit gets filed. If you decide you don't want to. And, you know, I believe very strongly that if you decided not to join the lawsuit right now and wanted to see how the legislative process played out, and then you got a bad feeling about how that's going later in the session and decided you wanted to jump into the lawsuit, I would be very surprised if they did not take latecomers to that lawsuit and accept, you know, more named plaintiffs, amend the pleadings to reflect that, and allow us to pay it at a later time. I'd be shocked if that was not the case. So that's what I know. In addition, as far as the legal roads forward for you.
All right, thank you for that additional insight. Council, open up for discussion.
A few comments. Question. I support waiting for this March 2026 session to see how it plays out instead of joining on the lawsuit itself, especially if we can get in early. And do you know what committee the Florida League of Cities is coming up is going to be under?
I was looking at the email I got this morning. I do not. So what I got was from Rebecca O'Hara, who's Deputy General Counsel at the Florida League. And
It's probably on the redevelopment committee, wouldn't you think?
The what?
Like redevelopment and planning.
Yeah.
It's the one I'm on.
Probably.
I think that
would seem like that would make the most sense, but she didn't indicate in the email that I got this morning or this afternoon from her. It just says that the league will be providing suggested modifications to sections 18 and 28 of Senate Bill 180 in the 2026 session. She attached draft proposal edits for review and comment. That's what I have right now.
Thank you.
So the two, I feel like maybe it could be on two. I don't know if anyone is on any of these committees, so maybe you could ask your point person, but it could likely be in development, code compliance, redevelopment. Is that the one you're on? There's also intergovernmental relations, mobility, and emergency management. And this is an emergency bill. So is anyone on that policy committee? Are you on that one?
I'll give Rebecca a call
Okay.
tomorrow to find out.
Well, we can find out so we know what avenue potential for that.
And then I support what you mentioned earlier, Jay, on the readoption of any ordinances that are not more restrictive. Makes sense.
I have no comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should wait. Doesn't sound like there's any, like we could jump in on this if we decide we need or want to. And correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have the list of who has joined yet, or we do?
I do not.
Yeah, I think we should see that list.
The only thing I can tell you, I believe we got some recon from the city of Stewart. I think they passed the resolution.
Really?
I think Delray is also on that as well, but those are the two that I saw. No, I reached out to both of those managers, but I was able to get the Stewart information.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the risk here is we decide not to join, and they, you know, as Keith said, the judge ultimately has discretion as to how it's applied. But if you look at how they applied it to Form 6, it was uniform. No one has a crystal ball, but you would think that's the way they would apply it here as well. But
You would, like I said, the way the legislation actually ended up being written, it applies statewide.
Yeah.
It's not like there's targeted areas that truly got damaged, and that's where it applies. It applies everywhere.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think we need to jump into it. I think let's do some more research and see if we think it's the best move for our village.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to wait and see how the session goes. I wouldn't like to see us, unless it's absolutely necessary, repeal the four that are impacted. I'd like to wait and see. And if an application does come in where that would get applied, I think that we just have to make the determination at that time and just explain to the applicant what would possibly need to happen. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I've never worked for a law firm, but is the pay-to-play concept of joining in? I mean, I look at a class action, well, this is not a class action. A class action, the costs are all borne by the plaintiff's counsel. I don't understand why we would want to just pay somebody $20,000 to include it. Is that common, Keith? I mean, that's kind of more, it's not really here or there. I don't support
I think
joint
common
lawsuits.
is the right word. I mean, they're obviously trying to get as many, they're not willing to do this work pro bono, so, and I'm sure they don't have one regular client that they service who's willing to foot the whole bill, so they obviously want to get as much, from a image standpoint, the more jurisdictions that sign on, that says something to someone, as opposed to just one or two cities. But the practical economic reality is litigation is painfully expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, like I said, I don't support paying to join in the litigation at this point, especially as something's been filed. And I don't really want to see us repeal anything at this point. I think we should just address it if that's logistically possible and procedurally possible.
Yeah, what we can do is actually put a list of everything that we should not be enforcing during this period, and then we could even post it on our website and just say, these things are on our code currently and in Muni code, but we will not be enforcing them until Senate Bill 180 is resolved.
If that's proper, I'd like to see us do that than repeal something.
Yeah, let us vet that, but
Yeah.
that could be an option, but let us vet that first.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I had the same thought as Vice Mayor. I mean, because my biggest question was restrictive and burdensome is not defined. So who defines that? And who's to say truly that our codes are more restrictive or burdensome? So part of me is like, I agree, do we not repeal them and just see what happens? I would never want to open us up to litigation, but like the reverse of what you said with the joining the lawsuit against it is years and years and years. What is the likelihood, or what would it look like if someone were to be like, well, I believe this is more restrictive, so I'm going to sue you?
I mean, it seems to me that under the current text of the statute, it would be, we have our code that was written after August 1st of 2024. A developer came in and we apply that code to their application. They would say, Dear Village of Tequesta, we believe that this violates state law because this provision is more burdensome and restrictive than the law was before August 1st, 2024, and we think you're in violation of that law. We would respectfully disagree. They would file suit. They would have the burden to establish that and the lawsuit as the plaintiff. It would not be for us to prove it's not. It would be for them to prove it is.
Right, so they would have to come up with all the data and cost estimates, whatever the case may be, to prove that it actually is.
I mean, certain things probably are more intuitive than others. If you're increasing setbacks and decreasing developable space, we now we have less square footage to sell, or we have to have civic space that we didn't have to have before, so that's dedicated to something that that's costing us some there's a cost to that, and then is that overly burdensome or restrictive? It really would become a fact-finding exercise for the court, for the fact finder.
Because for the overlay districts, if I remember correctly, I thought we were very purposeful in making sure, so we didn't open ourselves up to litigation, that we weren't taking away like buildable square footage. It was kind of shifting things on parcels, not taking away.
We were very mindful of that,
Yeah.
and I think we really worked hard.
So again, is that really more restrictive then if we didn't take away the buildable square footage?
That would be the factual question that the court, or if it's a jury, the jury at the end of the day would have to make a decision based on whatever evidence is presented. Years and a lot of money. is to get to that point.
Those are really good points, and I'd be comfortable leaving our codes in play to see where that leads us. The Paradise Park does concern me as we start to talk about that, because it's active, but I feel comfortable leaving those in play.
Right, and like the living shoreline, I thought there was documentation when we were reviewing that in the long term it actually saves a homeowner money because it protects the wall. So like to me that's opposite of being more restrictive. You're actually protecting the wall and increasing longevity of the wall. So I don't know, I feel like, play devil's advocate, I'm kind of like, well really, can it be proved? And we've worked so hard on a lot of these, and it's interesting to me the state is all about DOJ right now, but yet they're not taking account. Quest alone has spent well above 6 figures with plans, studies, everything we put in these ordinances. Combine that with the whole state of what other cities probably talk about a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's just ironic to me.
And not to be tongue in cheek, but I mean the little memes that Jay put up. I mean, everyone is sitting there scratching their heads and rolling their eyes, trying to navigate through this. There are truly more questions than answers at this point. All of those are good questions, and there aren't any good answers yet. None that are no guidance from any court yet. There's all we have is the legislation that was passed.
Right.
And everybody asking those kind of questions.
And I mean, hopefully there's some advocacy efforts that help this session, but we're obviously at risk every year for hurricanes. Like I'm concerned, is this gonna indefinitely keep getting extended? And if it doesn't change, I know even that 100-mile radius, there was a law, was it 2 sessions ago? And maybe it ended up getting removed, but they were doing a 100-mile radius, similar kind of legislation, and we fell in the 100-mile radius of Nicole, and we had no damage here. So even a 100-mile radius can not bode well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of in favor of leaving things where they are right now. I usually want to always comply with the state, but this one I feel like digging my heels a little bit and challenging, because I do think, who's to say that these codes are more restrictive or burdensome?
I mean, if the village attorney is okay with it, I mean, that's my preferred option, because then we don't have to come back in and readopt everything in 2 years, right? There's a chance that you all may not be sitting on this board, or if some of you may not, and we've got to go through that whole process again. So if there is a path forward where we can keep them in place, that's...
As the mayor has so eloquently articulated, there are arguments. We did, in my opinion, work very hard and we're very mindful of that give and take when we were doing the overlay codes and when we were doing the design guideline stuff and all of that. Those we had a lot of discussions about that. So I think there are arguments to be made, and therefore an argument that we shouldn't just fall on the sword and say there's no reason to just concede.
And one option would be if a development application came in, and let's say that there were 3 things in question, right? They said these 3 things we think are more burdensome. Keith and I could sit down and vet those 3 things and troubleshoot it, and maybe there is one that we kind of back off of, but maybe we could kind of make that determination on a case-by-case basis with an application.
I'm good with that.
Great idea. 100%. Yeah, I'm tired of the state eroding our home rule every opportunity they get.
Yeah, it's getting worse and worse. Every session it feels like. Marianne, are there any comment cards?
Maurice, I live in the country club. The mayor is absolutely right. The ordinances that were on that list were designed not to be more restrictive or burdensome. They were designed to benefit all the properties. So the idea that they even fit into this extreme encroachment on local decision making is not credible. I did want to say and I'm glad that you're going in the direction of not repealing. That absolutely, repeal of our code is absolutely the wrong thing to do in the face of SB 180, which is an outrageous encroachment on local government. And absolutely the village should do nothing to accommodate it at all. The village code is legitimate, and the village should incur no cost whatsoever to accommodate the SB 180, including by, for example, paying for hours of legal work to repeal lawfully enacted code provisions that enact legitimate village interests. To the contrary, all of your effort as members of the council and staff should be directed to your duty to defend the interests of the village, including the village's legitimately enacted code in the face of what is an illegitimate encroachment by the state of Florida on municipal governance. That should be the priority of the legal advocacy for the village. In addition, I urge every member of the council, and I know you have, to express to the state lawmakers our extreme disapproval of SB 180, pointing out that it is completely incompatible with fundamental concepts of democracy in America. This disapproval is bipartisan, and this encroachment by state lawmakers on the legitimate interests of communities in the state of Florida is exactly analogous to the attempted destruction of Florida state parks that happened last year. It should be easy for state lawmakers to support repealing SB 180 in its entirety, and we understand that there are efforts in this direction underway. This is an additional reason why the village should not attempt to accommodate the bill. It would be most regrettable if we were to repeal and then SB 180 was repealed in turn or cut back such that we wouldn't need to do it. Think about the waste of money that we would have incurred. SB 180 stands as yet an additional reason for the council not to relax any village code parking requirement or any other provision that serves to prevent overdevelopment too, because we never know what the state would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Marianne, any other comment cards? Any other public comment? And just, I actually want to be clear, I am in favor of the other portions of SB 180, and I think we should comply as it relates to true emergency management. I was specifically just talking about the restrictions on land use.
Agreed.
So I want to make sure we were on the same page. We're in favor of the other portions of the bill. Okay, moving on, agenda item 5, discuss community outreach strategy by the Florida League of Cities on property tax reform. Jeremy?
So this item outlines proposed outreach initiative leveraging the Florida League of Cities formula toolkit. I know that you guys went to the Florida League of Cities annual conference. I know, well, three of you guys did. I think all three of you guys referenced this to me. We also had a Palm Beach County League of Cities meeting at the country club where Casey Cook brought some of these tools up. And so what you have in your packet, there's also a short video educational explaining the Save Our Homes provision, housing affordability. This is item which I should have probably led with, has to deal with property taxes. And so this toolkit will help educate residents about the property tax system, dispel common misconceptions, and reinforce the value of local services funded through the ad valorem revenues. We were able to work with Florida League of Cities. We provided some data. They provided us a data packet that we can share. I know the mayor has reached out or has conversations with legislators from time to time. I know other council members do. So this packet and our data packet and the Florida League of Cities can be used for just information, just to get information out to our residents and local officials or I guess our state officials on how this is going to affect Tequesta and our region. So wanted to share, make sure everybody's on the same page before we just started using this information and blasting out. And so any discussion or questions, I can answer those.
Thank you. Council, any comments, questions?
None for me.
None for me.
Nope. Okay, so does this allow us, do we have to formally vote, Keith, or does consensus allow us to, I know staff can do messaging, but as we have individual conversations, we can use it as well. Do you need a formal vote on that, or is consensus good?
Well, we can't vote tonight. So
I know, it would have to be
I think
meeting.
if there's council consensus to that, I would be fine with that.
Just to make sure. Okay, Marianne, any comment cards? No, any public comment? No? All right, and with that, we are done. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Great job, Mayor.
Ooh, we finished earlier than I thought.
I'm gonna get
That was a busy workshop right there.
Yeah, 5 on the agenda.
I did. I normally don't